Chronicles of the Grim Reaper, In the Wake of Shadows, by Griz Calderon. The town of Blackwood crouched beneath low-hanging clouds, its jagged rooftops breaking through the mist like crooked teeth. The stone buildings, aged and weathered by time, pressed together as if bracing against the unseen weight of something inevitable. Narrow alleys twisted between them, barely wide enough for two to pass. Moss crept up the sides of walls, flourishing in the absence of sunlight. A heavy stillness blanketed the streets, save for the faint flickering of oil lanterns swaying in the cold wind. The town's heart beat quietly, but there was no life to it. It had been weeks since laughter echoed in the marketplace, days since the baker's oven last burned. The air tasted stale, and the faintest trace of rot clung to the edges of everything. At the harbor's edge, where stone met the sea, a lone ship drifted silently toward the docks. Its sails sagged, torn and blackened from wind and time. The wood creaked beneath the gentle lapping of waves, and on deck, bodies lay strewn in grotesque positions, pale and contorted, mouths agape, as if their final breaths had tried to claw their way free. The name, the Black Mercy, was etched into the ship's side. The letters chipped and faded. But no cries escaped the ship. Only silence accompanied its arrival. From the shadows of the dock, the Grim Reaper watched. The first man who saw the ship was the dockmaster, a grizzled figure who had spent his life among sailors. He'd seen wrecks before, cargo left to rot after storms, even the occasional ghost vessel found empty on calm seas. But this was different. There were no survivors. And yet, the ship moved as if guided by unseen hands. By the time others arrived, the dockmaster had already climbed aboard. When he stumbled back down, his face was pale beneath his weathered skin. He spoke of corpses, of rats darting through the shadows of the lower decks. Curiosity drew the townsfolk closer. Some whispered of riches to be scavenged, while others spoke of curses. But the hunger for coin was greater than fear. One by one, they climbed aboard. What they brought back was more than cargo. Within days of the ship's arrival, Blackwood began to fall. Fever crept through homes like an unwelcome guest, reducing men and women to trembling, delirious shells of themselves. Sores blistered and ruptured. Flesh blackened. The air thickened with the sickly sweet scent of rot. In the small stone house at the edge of town, Ian's mother was the first to fall ill. She coughed blood into a cloth napkin and told Ian stories by the fire to distract him from her trembling hands. She spoke of death not as an ending, but as a shadowy figure who wandered between worlds, faceless and cold. "Don't ever speak of him, Ian," she whispered one night, her voice ragged. "If you feel him near, close your eyes. Pray he passes over you." Ian sat beside her, clutching his threadbare teddy bear, staring into the flames. His father followed 3 days later. Ian remembered the way he'd cried over his wife's body, pressing his forehead to hers beneath the white sheet. By nightfall, he too lay still beneath the same covering. Ian sat on the wooden floor of their home, tracing the lines between the stone tiles with his finger. His teddy bear dangled limply in his hand. The house was quiet. No coughing, no murmured stories. Only the wind rattled faintly against the shutters. His parents lay beside him, their bodies concealed beneath linen sheets. His mother's hand protruded slightly from beneath the covering, pale and stiff. The fire had long since gone out. Ian hadn't tended it. He hadn't spoken since his father's breath rattled for the last time. There was nothing to say. A soft knock on the door startled him. His eyes flicked to the entrance, but no one entered. The wind whispered against the walls, but the door didn't move. Ian knew someone was there. The shadows stretched unnaturally across the floor, pooling in the corner where a tall figure emerged. The Reaper's robe shimmered faintly, as if the fabric had been spun from the night sky. It flowed gently around his feet, rippling like liquid smoke. Beneath his hood, Ian could make out no face, no eyes, just a dark expanse that seemed to pull everything inward. The curved blade of the scythe hung loosely at his side, its edge reflecting the pale light that crept through the window. Ian clutched his teddy bear tighter but didn't move away. The Reaper stood quietly, watching the boy. "You will be with them soon." The voice wasn't spoken aloud, but Ian felt the words pressed gently into his mind. They weren't harsh or cold. They were soft, comforting, like his mother's voice had been when she tucked him beneath the blankets at night. Ian wiped his nose on his sleeve. "Will it hurt?" "No." His small hands trembled as he curled beneath the sheets next to his parents. The Reaper knelt beside him, resting his hand lightly against the boy's shoulder. The weight of life slipped away quietly, leaving behind only the faintest echo of a sigh. Ian's small body lay between his parents, his teddy bear tucked beneath his chin. Townsfolk whispered of curses, of demons let loose by the ship's cargo. But as more families succumbed, their fear took a new shape. They began to speak of a figure, tall and cloaked in shadows, standing in the doorways of the dying. Stories grew like weeds, spreading from one fearful voice to another. They painted him as skeletal, his hollow eyes glowing red beneath his hood. His scythe dripped with the blood of the innocent, and his touch invited death. By the time the plague had consumed the town, the image of the Reaper had been forever transformed. The Reaper stood at the harbor, gazing out at the remnants of the Black Mercy, now burned to ash. The smoke rose lazily into the gray sky. He remembered Ian's small voice, the quiet trust in his eyes. The world had changed, but Ian had seen him for what he was, a guide, a necessary shadow. The fear of man would not shake him from his path. As the wind carried the ash away, the Reaper whispered softly, "One day they will understand." The end.